everyone, welcome back to another speed build, or welcome in if you're new. Today I'm building this large English estate shell. I had a large wealthy family in mind when I was building this one, maybe from old money, old wealthy money. This build was in Brindleton Bay from the Cats and Dogs pack. It's on the largest lot of that world, a 64 by 64 lot called Hounds Head, I think. Although this is only a shell build, if you happen to download this, I did draw out a bit of a floor plan already with some indication of what room I had in mind for each. So for example, there is a fireplace in the room I figured would be the living room, and the kitchen counter in the kitchens, but very basic. Usually I'm a clutterer, but I got a few comments asking if I could do some shell builds, as I get a lot of game players seems to love to decorate their own homes, which I get and I love. I really do need to get back into some gameplay. I just get obsessed with building and I just love it so much. Anyways, back to the build. This build ends up having a large kitchen, living room, a hobbies room, an attached greenhouse that leads to the vegetable patch, and in a walled garden. That's all on the ground floor. The second floor has 7 rooms and 3 bathrooms and a lookout spot over to the back garden. But again, these are completely empty, so they can be made into whatever or make bigger rooms too if needs be. Then the third floor has 5 rooms and 2 possible bathrooms. Again, all empty. I mainly only give room suggestions on the ground floor for this one. So it's a pretty big estate house for a large family or a couple of families, or the 100 baby challenge. To anyone that has done that challenge, well done. I did try it a few years ago, but ended up giving up pretty fast. I just couldn't cope. I think the only challenge I'd done was the Not So Berry by Lil Simsy. I actually wouldn't mind starting one again, because I really loved that one. Although I didn't finish it, but yeah. And I know I keep saying this, I haven't even gameplayed in such a long time, so I would feel like a complete beginner again with gameplay. I have no idea on some of the new features that came with the new packs recently, or probably in the last year or so, but I guess that's the fun part of it too, learning about it all over again. I see there's another legacy challenge as well, a vegetable one I think, from again Lil Simsy. I also started the Sims in Bloom. I don't know who created that one, but it was pretty similar to the Not So Berry, but flowers obviously. But I didn't even finish Generation 1. I always get excited about the new build ideas I get in my head and then slowly get sucked into doing that. I'd love to know what your favourite gameplay challenge is though, because I might check them out and it'll give me something to get back into for gameplay. Anyway, sorry, back to the build again. I wanted to create this grand type garden. I imagined the gardener sitting on his petrol lawnmower, making sure all the grass lines are straight and perfect. I'm sure we'll see that at some point soon, but at the minute I'm just going through all the wallpapers and what wallpapers I wanted to use. I think I used about 5 or 6 different wallpapers for this one, so I wanted to be a bit more different than what I would normally do. I usually just stick to 1 or 2 wallpapers, but no, I think it turned out pretty nice because I wanted an old feel but also new-ish kind of. But yeah, so in the back I have added a hot tub and sitting area. I wasn't going to add a pool, but I do end up adding one, and to the right of the back of the house I created an old tire swing. It took me quite a while to figure out what tree I wanted. I got this idea from Jessica Pye. I saw her doing it in a previous build a while ago and always loved how it looked, and I think this was the perfect lot for it for once. I was actually going to put a tree house in the spot where I did put the tire swing because it's unfortunately not functional, but it's obviously easy to delete and add either a functional swing or a tree house, so that would be cute too. To the other side of the back garden, beside the pool, I created a little chill out area. I put a fake apple tree down and added loads of apples like they'd fall onto the ground. I really don't know if they'll end up being stanky and going off, or if the debug apples just stay looking like that or not. I don't know, please let me know. So under that tree I put a picnic blanket down with one of the baskets from the cottage living. So your Sims can sit there under the tree and enjoy the day, and in theory get apples dropped on their head. I also added a little fire pit as well in that area. I was going to add a tent as well, but decided it would just be too much going on. But I did add the tree stump with the little bunnies that come out of it, so that would also be super cute eating a picnic with the wild bunnies, as long as they don't attack and eat the food. Anyways, I'll end the voiceover here, and I would just like to say again, I don't know why, I always feel so awkward plugging my creator code, but it does really help me out, and I do get a small commission when my code is entered if you purchase any Sims pack from the EA app. And for those who have and do use my code, I just want to say a huge thank you. I appreciate it so much, and it literally means the world to me that you considered me when purchasing. And again, I'll say it, if it's not my code you use, please do use someone's. It's less money for EA and you're helping support a creator in general. So again, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the build and have a wonderful week. Bye.
you.